What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Darian is Fishing. If you're new to my channel, I make a lot of fishing videos out on Lake Gunnersville, other lakes around Alabama. If you haven't already, please smash the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and if you find this video informative at all, give it a thumbs up at the end. Today we're going to talk about swimming a jig and my 6 tips that I think everyone needs to know about swimming a jig. These are my tips. You know, if you're fishing like at Rayburn, swimming the hay grass, it's going to be a little bit different. If you're down at Toho fishing real thick hyacinths and just really thick grass, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to break this down how I personally fish, and I think for the majority of the U.S., this is going to be fair statements on what I'm saying. So I've got 6 key important steps how to swim a jig. I'm going to do 6 minutes starting right now. So the first thing you need to figure out when you're wanting to swim a jig is what kind of cover are you fishing? Are you fishing really heavy grass or sparse kind of broken up grass? That's going to determine a lot of the other factors that play when you're wanting to swim a jig. But I break it down with 2 different rod sizes. I'd use a 7/4 heavy and a 7-foot heavy. Again, you can use a little bit lighter or a little bit heavier depending on where you're at, but for me, I like those 2. The 7-foot heavy rod that I use has a really fast tip. I use that one when I want to make very accurate casts, skip into places, maybe around docks or underhanging trees where I want to skip under. I'm typically not using that rod around very heavy cover. Then I go to the 7/4 when I am around really heavy cover, like some of the stuff you see behind me. That 7/4, make a long cast, fish your rod high, be able to set the hook hard, drag that fish out of the grass. So 7-foot heavy, 7/4 heavy for me. The next thing when you're swimming a jig is, I think, line size, and I'm gonna slash and say reel. The reel I use is always the same, 7/3 to 1. You can use faster. I wouldn't use any slower than a 7/3 to 1. It's just gonna be perfect. But line size is gonna be important. If I'm fishing super heavy cover, 65-pound braid, I like to use 50-pound braid most of the time. And if it's ultra clear or I want to keep the bait down more, I'm going to use fluorocarbon. Typically 20-pound fluorocarbon, maybe 17, like maybe if I'm wanting to keep the bait down really far. But if I'm wanting to, like if I'm stroking a jig out of the grass and I'm fishing a little bit deeper, but it's a swim jig, I'm going to use fluorocarbon because it keeps the bait down. Everything else, going straight braid, I'm hitting them hard. I want to wrench them to the boat really quickly. It's a power fishing technique, and I think you need to use power fishing equipment. So I go with 50-pound braid. The next thing is jig weight, and I think for me, 90% of the time I go with a 3/8 ounce. You can fish it fast if you need to, holding your rod tip up, you know, and reeling or pumping, or you can, you know, hold your rod tip down, let the bait fall a bit further, slow reel it, or you can make long casts and stroke it up and out of the grass. And I think 3/8 just kind of covers everything. If you're fishing super shallow, go into that 3/16 or a quarter is going to be better if you're only fishing super shallow. And if you're only fishing super deep, that 1/2 ounce is going to be better because you can keep it down. But I think for the most part, 3/8 ounce is the ticket. The 4th thing that we're going to talk about is jig color. Now there's hundreds of colors. You know, there's so many options available for a swim jig, but I try to break it down between these 3 right here. A black and blue, a green pumpkin, or like a brim color, and a white/shad color. I don't try to mix them up. I've got a couple different variations of shad and a couple different variations of bluegill, but I'm typically gonna throw all black and blue, this bluegill, or an all white swim jig. That's my 3 favorites. And to be dead honest, 90% of the time I'm going all white. But just match the forage. If you're fishing, if it's muddy water, I'm gonna go black and blue. If it's pretty much anything, I'm gonna go with shad. And then if I'm fishing around a bunch of bluegill or I'm seeing a bunch of bluegill on the bank, I'll switch up to that bluegill. But 90% of the time, my go-to swim jig is all white. So now we're gonna talk about the trailers. There's obviously a bunch of different plastics you can put on the back of a swim jig. I like to break them down between just 2 of them, which is a crawl style, 2 arms, 2 flappers, like a pack of crawl, a Z crawl, a swimming crawl. Any of them, whatever brand you like. This is a stroker crawl by 6 cents. It's got those 2 flappers, or a paddle tail Swimbait style like this. This right here is my go-to setup. I just like a swim jig with a Swimbait trailer. If I'm fishing ultra shallow, though, this is one thing to remember. If you're fishing ultra shallow, that crawl style typically works better because it's like 2 paddles, and it kind of, I mean, the way I think of it is like swimming. You got 2 arms up there flopping, and it's like it raises the bait up. With that one Swimbait, it's like it's just more subtle and like it wants to dive down. I feel like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just how I've always thought about it. So if I'm fishing ultra shallow, I go with the crawl. If I'm fishing a little bit deeper or around a lot of shad, I'm gonna go with the swim bait. Last but not least is the retrieve for the swim jig. Some people have different opinions on this, but Alabama style, Coosa River style, I'm always, not always, but 90% of the time, I'm swimming my swim jig pretty fast. I'm hopping it, I'm pumping it, and that's just my retrieve. I like that. It makes a lot of action in the crawls or the swim bait. It helps keep your bait up a little bit. It slows your bait down. So you're fishing over the top of the grass, and every time you pump it, it's like the bait pauses a bunch, so the fish just absolutely go crush it. But on the flip side, if you're wanting to keep your bait down in the water column more, you're not going to be able to pump it. You're going to have to let it fall, slow retrieve it back, or hop it up, let the bait fall. Hop it up, let the bait fall. If you're wanting to fish it down a little bit deeper. But yeah, that's kind of my go-to. So that was really quick, my 6 tips on fishing a swim jig. But I will show you guys my absolute favorite setup. Typically what I'm using right here, 7-foot heavy. This is a Smoke S3 rod, 7 3-to-1 reel, 50-pound braid, 3/8 ounce shad color swim jig, and a paddle tail swim bait trailer. That is absolutely my go-to setup for swimming a jig. Hope you guys enjoyed this kind of tips video, like a how-to video. If you've got any comments or any questions, please drop them down in the comment section below. And if you think I said something wrong or I did something wrong, or maybe you've got a trick for me that I could try, drop in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear about it. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'll see you on the next one.